My name is Angela Maxwell, 29 years old. 7 years ago, my sister tore my passport on the morning I was supposed to fly to England. My mother's exact words, "Your sister needs you." I missed my flight. I didn't cry. I took a cab to the embassy. The officer looked at her screen, looked at me, and said, "Ms. Maxwell, this is your second application. Your first visa was approved 3 years ago. Why didn't you travel?" I had never applied before. That afternoon, I learned my mother had forged my signature on a refusal letter for a $128,000 scholarship I'd already won at 19. For 7 years, I worked, studied, and stayed quiet. Tonight, my sister turns 35 at a charity gala in Charlotte. She doesn't know I'm coming. She doesn't know I'm bringing the letter. If you've ever been the daughter your family told to wait, stay with me. Hit subscribe, because what I'm about to show you took me 7 years to say out loud. The black Samsonite had been packed for 3 days. My boarding pass was tucked into the front pocket. London Heathrow, 11:40 in the morning, British Airways Flight 226. I had walked past that suitcase 14 times in 72 hours just to confirm it was real. At 7 o'clock that morning, Whitney came down the stairs in her silk pajamas. She poured herself coffee and stood in the kitchen doorway watching me. "You're really doing this," she said. "After everything Mom did for us." I didn't answer. I had learned, by 22, that answering Whitney was a trap. If I said yes, she would cry. If I said no, she would call me cruel. If I said nothing, she would later tell my mother I had been hostile. She watched me load the last carry-on. Then she looked at the shoe closet by the front door. She smiled. That was the first sign I missed. I went upstairs to brush my teeth one last time. I came back down at 7:38 to find my passport in 4 pieces on the Persian rug. Whitney was holding the final corner between her thumb and forefinger. "Oops," she said. My mother stood in the doorway between the foyer and the kitchen. Her hands were folded against her stomach the way she folded them at funerals. "Ha, Angela," she said. "England can wait. Your sister has her engagement party in 3 weeks. Who's going to cook? Who's going to clean? Be reasonable." The piece with my photograph had landed face down on the carpet. I could see the back of my own head through the watermark. My father was on the staircase. He was holding his coffee cup. He didn't say anything, but he turned his face away the way you turn away from something you have already seen. I picked up the 4 pieces. I put them in a Ziploc bag from the kitchen drawer. I put the bag in my laptop case. I picked up my keys. "Where do you think you're going?" my mother asked. "Out," I said. I closed the front door behind me. I did not slam it. The Uber driver was an older man with a careful voice. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror somewhere on Independence Boulevard. "Bad morning, ma'am?" "No," I said. Clarifying one. I opened my banking app while we drove. I had checked it the night before. $11,512. 3 years of double shifts. 2 years of weekend tutoring. 1 year of freelance social media work for a chiropractor in Pineville. The screen loaded. $11.85. I refreshed. Same number. I refreshed again. Same number. I did not cry. I sat very still and watched Charlotte roll past my window. I noticed how the trees on Park Road were already turning. I noticed how strange it was that I was still noticing things. At 10:36, I stood at the British Airways counter at Charlotte Douglas International. I had no passport. I had no claim to make. I had a bag of paper scraps and a checking account showing $11 and a working brain that had not yet processed what was happening. "Ma'am," the agent said, "do you need assistance?" "No," I said. "I needed a different morning." She nodded as if she understood. She did not. I watched the departures board. The 11:40 flight to Heathrow held its position for a long minute. Then the row blinked. boarding, then departed. 11:42 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The plane I had spent 3 years saving for left without me. I took out my phone and opened Google Maps. I typed, British Consulate General Atlanta, open until 4 p.m. I had 3 hours and a rental car app, and no reason to go home. I walked into the British Consulate General in downtown Atlanta at 2:14 in the afternoon. The receptionist took one look at the Ziploc bag in my hand and pressed a button under her desk. A woman came out within 4 minutes. She introduced herself as Eleanor Bradshaw. She was in her 50s, gray hair cropped close, the kind of officer who does not waste words. She brought me into a small interview room. I told her what had happened that morning. I did not embellish. I did not cry. She typed quickly. Then she stopped typing. "Let me pull your file, Ms. Maxwell." The pause that followed was 22 seconds long. I counted because I had nothing else to do. She looked up. "This is your second application," she said. "Your first visa was approved 3 years ago. Why didn't you travel?" I felt the chair beneath me suddenly become very specific. I felt my hands. "I never applied in 2015. She did not respond. She clicked something. She turned her monitor a quarter turn so I could see it. April 14th, 2015. Visa approved. Marshall Scholarship sponsorship confirmed. I was 19 years old in April 2015. I had never seen a passport in my life. She did not turn the monitor back. She picked up a printout from her tray and laid it on the desk between us. There was a letter on the desk. My signature was at the bottom. I had never written it. "To understand how we got there, I have to take you back to Myers Park, Charlotte. The house at the corner of Roswell and Sharon. White brick, blue shutters. A magnolia tree my grandfather planted in 1984. My father, Curtis Maxwell, made decent money as a senior accountant for a regional firm. My mother, Pamela, had taught 5th grade for 6 years before quitting to raise daughters who would, in her words, take the family somewhere. There were 2 of us. Whitney was 6 years older. She was the one with the smile that landed on yearbook pages. I was the one who read at recess. At Whitney's sweet 16, my mother stood up to give a toast. She raised a champagne flute and said, in front of 40 people, "Whitney is the Maxwell who'll take us somewhere. Angela is the Maxwell who'll keep us together." I was 10. I laughed because everyone laughed. I didn't realize until much later that keeping us together was a job description. Spring of 2014. I was 18. I had received acceptance letters from Princeton, Duke, and Wake Forest. I came home on a Tuesday and laid all 3 on the kitchen table. My mother glanced at them while she stirred a pot of pasta sauce. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she said. "We're proud." At dinner that night, my father set down his fork. "Angela," he said, "we need to talk about money." My mother answered for him. "Honey, we just don't have college money for 2 girls. Whitney needed it. You'll figure something out. You always do." My parents had paid every cent of Whitney's UNC tuition 6 years earlier, $96,800 across 4 years. Whitney had graduated in 2012 with a communications degree and had been drifting between marketing internships and self-styled lifestyle ventures ever since. She lived in a rented condo in South Park that my parents helped subsidize. None of this was discussed at the dinner table. I asked the question that has haunted me for 10 years. What about the college fund Grandpa Maxwell left for both of us? My mother's spoon stopped moving in the pot. "Don't bring up your grandfather," she said. "Eat your dinner." I did not eat. I went upstairs. I opened my laptop. I started a spreadsheet. I called it UK Plan, version 1. By the end of 2015, I had 3 jobs. 5 a.m. to 9 a.m., barista at a coffee shop on East Boulevard. 3 p.m. to 7 p.m., SAT tutor in Concord, a 30-minute drive each way. 9 p.m. to midnight, social media freelance for any small business that would pay through Venmo. My mother had set up a joint savings account when I was 16. She was the co-signer. I never thought about it. Why would I? By April 2018, the spreadsheet had $11,512 on the balance line. Tuition for an LSE master's degree in finance, plus visa fees, plus rent estimates, plus 6 months of groceries. On April 14, 2015, I had written one note in the margin of that spreadsheet. Should hear back from Marshall today. The next line said, Mom got the mail. She said nothing came. Whitney spent that week in Cabo. She posted a selfie on Instagram with the caption, "So grateful for parents who believe in dreams. #blessed." I worked a double that night. Looking back, the signs were small but consistent. My Aunt Constance, my father's younger sister, had stopped sending birthday cards in 2015. We had been close. She had taught me to make biscuits when I was 10. Then suddenly, no card on my 19th birthday, no card on my 20th. I assumed she was angry about something I didn't know. My personal email crashed 3 times in 2016. Each time, my mother said I had been hacked, and she fixed it. Each time, I lost my login history. In June 2015, a LinkedIn profile appeared with my name. I didn't make it. I didn't have a LinkedIn. I assumed it was spam and moved on. At the family Christmas party in 2017, Whitney got drunk on Prosecco. She cornered me in the laundry room. "You always wanted to be the smart one," she said. "But Mom and I figured it out years ago, didn't we?" I stared at her. She was leaning against the dryer. Her lipstick had smeared. "Figured what out, Whitney?" She laughed. She didn't answer. She walked away. I told myself she was drunk. I went back to refilling the appetizer trays. July 2018. Whitney got engaged to Trevor Hollingsworth. The Hollingsworths were old Charlotte. Banking, bourbon, 3 generations on the country club board. Trevor was 30, polite, decent in the way men are when they have never had to be anything else. The engagement party was scheduled for late September. The wedding for May 2019, at Quail Hollow Club. The day after the engagement, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table. She had a yellow legal pad in front of her. "Angela," she said, "we're going to need you to delay England. Just a year, maybe 2. Whitney needs help with the planning." I told her my flight was already booked. My LSE deposit was already paid. My visa appointment was already scheduled. She smiled. "We'll see." The first time I met Trevor, he shook my hand and held it a beat too long. "Whitney told me so much about your sacrifices for the family," he said. "You're the heart of the Maxwells," she says. I had never told Whitney anything like that. I had never said the word sacrifice out loud in our house. That was when I started to suspect that Whitney had been writing my life behind my back. I just didn't know yet how much. The morning she tore my passport, she wasn't stopping me from leaving. She was protecting a fiction the whole family had been selling for 3 years. Eleanor Bradshaw slid the printout across the table with 2 fingers. "Marshall Commission," she said. "Withdrawal of acceptance. May 3rd, 2015. I picked it up. The paper was cream-colored, heavier than office stock. The Marshall Commission letterhead was embossed at the top. The body of the letter was typed in 12-point Times New Roman. The text said, "Dear members of the Commission, after careful reflection and conversation with my family, I must regretfully withdraw my acceptance of the Marshall Scholarship for the 2015 to 2017 cohort. Family caregiving obligations require my presence in the United States. I cannot in good conscience accept funds I will be unable to honor. With deepest apologies, Angela R. Maxwell." At the bottom was a signature. I looked at it for a long time. The A was mine. The downstroke was mine. The N curl was almost mine. But the R was wrong. My middle initial has a sharp fold at the top, almost like a tent. The R on this letter was round, soft, looped. I had never made an R like that in my life. But my mother had. She signed every Christmas card with that exact R. I had watched her do it for 22 years. "Ms. Maxwell," Bradshaw said gently, "are you all right?" I shook my head. I was not. She pulled out a second document. Heavier paper, gold seal at the top. "This is the original award letter. April 14th, 2015. The Marshall Commission selected 48 scholars that year. You were one of them. The award amount was printed in bold under my name. $128,500, 2 years at the University of Cambridge, Pembroke College, Master of Philosophy in International Relations, mailed to the Maxwell residence in Myers Park, North Carolina. I had won the Marshall Scholarship at 19. I had been one of 48 in the country. I had been notified. The letter had arrived at my house. My mother had taken it from the mailbox, and then she had handed me a coffee apron and told me to be careful driving to my 5 a.m. shift. Bradshaw watched my face. She let me sit. "I shouldn't say this," she said quietly after a minute. "I've been doing consular work for 15 years. I have seen a mother do this once before. I have never seen a mother and a sister do it together. Yours did both." I looked up at her. "How do you know about my sister?" She turned the second monitor. The first visa application, dated March 2015, listed an emergency contact. Whitney Maxwell. Address? Same as mine. Phone number? Whitney's. I sat in that chair for 11 minutes. Bradshaw timed it. She told me later it was the longest she had ever waited for a victim to speak. I was doing math. 3 years. 3 jobs. Approximately $11 an hour. Average. 65 hours a week. Average. 51 weeks a year. 3 years. I had worked, by my rough count, just over 109,000 hours of effort to save $11,500 to buy a thing I had already won. And while I was doing it, my sister had been telling Charlotte society I was the noble Maxwell who chose family over Cambridge. I had been paying interest on a fiction. I asked Bradshaw 3 questions. "May I keep a copy of this letter?" "Yes." "If I need a forensic handwriting expert, can you recommend one?" "Yes." "Is there a process for the Marshall Commission to reconsider a withdrawal that wasn't actually written by the recipient?" She did not answer immediately. She wrote something on a slip of paper and slid it across the desk. The slip said, "Theodore Ashford, Director, Marshall Commission, North American Office," a Boston phone number. "Tell him Eleanor sent you," she said. "He owes me one. And Ms. Maxwell, he will want 3 things. Motive, the original document, and a pattern. Find me a pattern, and we have a case." I left the consulate at 4:05. The receptionist held the door for me without speaking. I think she had heard part of the conversation through the wall. I called another Uber. I asked the driver to take me to the nearest Hampton Inn. Halfway there, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. I let it ring. The text came 30 seconds later. "Are you done with your tantrum? Whitney's home crying. Come back. We'll talk." I opened my notes app. I created a new note. I titled it Day 1. I wrote 3 lines. Rule 1, never use the family email again. Rule 2, never argue with mom. Rule 3, document everything from now on. I checked into the Hampton Inn at 4:51, room 209. I asked the front desk for a room with a working desk, a quiet hallway, and no neighbors in the adjacent room. The clerk did not ask why. I sat at the desk and pulled the 4 pieces of my passport from the Ziploc bag. I laid them out flat. I photographed them. I emailed the photographs to a new account I created right there. angela.r.maxwell.cb@protonmail.com. CB stood for Cambridge Bound. That afternoon, I realized the cruelest thing my mother had done was not stealing my future. It was making me grateful for crumbs of a life I had already been awarded. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the desk with my laptop open. I made a list. Things I knew. My mother had forged a refusal letter in May 2015. The Marshall Commission had accepted it. My sister's emergency contact had been on the original application. The visa had been approved. The award had been $128,500. Things I needed to find out. What was the bank account history of my joint savings? Why was it empty? What had happened to my grandfather's money? Why had my Aunt Constance gone silent? Why had my email been hacked 3 times? Who had created the LinkedIn profile in my name? At 3 a.m, I wrote the question I had been avoiding for 5 hours. Why did Whitney smile when she looked at the shoe closet? She had known the passport was hidden in the shoe closet. She had checked. 3 days before. Maybe more. She had been planning the destruction of the document for at least 72 hours. She had not improvised. She had executed. I called my Aunt Constance the next morning at 8:14. I had not spoken to her in 3 years. She picked up on the second ring. She was silent for 6 full seconds. "Angela," she said. "Sweet Lord, I always wondered why you stopped writing me." I told her I had stopped because she had stopped first. She started crying. "Honey, I sent you a card every birthday since 2015. Every Christmas. I sent you a check for graduation. None of them came back. None of them got answered. I thought you were ashamed of me." She lived in Asheville, 2 hours west of Charlotte. She told me she would drive to Atlanta that morning. She told me to stay at the hotel. She arrived at the Hampton Inn at 1:22 p.m. with a USPS shoebox under her arm. We sat on the edge of the bed. She opened it. Inside were 11 greeting cards, all in my Aunt Constance's handwriting, all addressed to me at the Maxwell residence, all unopened, and a letter from my grandfather, dated November 2013, 6 months before he died. He had written it to be read on my 18th birthday. It began, "My dear Angela, if you are reading this, you are 18, which means I am gone. But I have left you something." Aunt Constance watched me read. When I looked up, she said, "There is something else, baby. About your grandfather's will. Did your mother ever tell you what was in it?" My grandfather, Henry Maxwell, had died in November 2014. He had been a quiet man. He had owned a hardware store in Gastonia for 41 years. He had lived in a 2-bedroom house with no debt and a pension. His will had 2 beneficiary lines for his granddaughters. Whitney Maxwell, $50,000, earmarked for undergraduate education. Angela Rose Maxwell, $50,000. Earmarked for international graduate study only. Aunt Constance was the executor. She had brought the photocopy. "Honey," she said, "your grandfather knew. He knew what your mother was. He earmarked yours for graduate school precisely so she couldn't touch it for Whitney's tuition. The trust was supposed to be released to you when you turned 21. I was 22. The release date had been 13 months ago. I had received nothing." Aunt Constance took my hand. "Then where did it go?" I checked out of the Hampton Inn the next morning. I drove a rental car back to Charlotte. I did not go to the Maxwell house. I went to a small studio apartment I found on Craigslist in the South End neighborhood, $850 a month, no questions asked. I dropped one of my 3 jobs. I kept the tutoring and the freelance work. I needed cash, but I needed time more. On October 2nd, 2018, I signed a lease for Unit 209. I had a door. I had a key. And no one named Maxwell knew where it was. I texted my mother that afternoon. "I'm staying with a friend for a while. Don't worry about me. I'll come for Whitney's wedding." It was the first lie I had ever told her. I did not intend to come. 2 days later, I called the Boston number Bradshaw had written down for me. Theodore Ashford answered on the 3rd ring. He was 61 years old, a former professor at the Harvard Kennedy School, and the current director of the Marshall Commission's North American office. "Eleanor told me you might call," he said. "Tell me what you have." I told him the timeline. I told him about the letter, the visa, the bank account, the will, the silenced aunt, the impersonated emails. I spoke for 43 minutes. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Ms. Maxwell," he said, "the Commission has never reactivated a withdrawn award. We have also never had a withdrawal that was not, in fact, written by the awardee. Bring me proof. Bring me everything. And one thing more, do not speak to your family about this case until I tell you to. We will need their statements to be unprepared." He emailed me an hour later. The header read, "This conversation is privileged until we say otherwise." At the bottom of the email, he had added a single line. "Find the money, Ms. Maxwell. Whatever your mother stole, she stole for someone." For 3 years, I had thought I was saving up to leave. I was actually saving up to fight. The receipts had been there all along. I just hadn't known I was the prosecution. I spent the winter of 2018 and the spring of 2019 building a file. Theodore Ashford connected me with Dr. Audrey Lockhart, a forensic document examiner based in Washington, D.C. She had testified in 3 federal forgery cases. Her CV was 16 pages long. I flew to D.C. in February with a manila envelope. Inside were the original refusal letter, 6 samples of my mother's handwriting from Christmas cards and grocery lists, and 6 samples of my sister's handwriting from old yearbook signatures. Dr. Lockhart took 19 days. She called me on a Friday morning. "Definitive match on the signature," she said. "Pamela Joan Maxwell." The body of the letter was typed, but the cursive letter forms in the salutation match Pamela's hand. Whitney's fingerprints, however, are on the envelope. They work together. The mother forged. The daughter mailed. She paused. "And there is something else, Ms. Maxwell." I checked the Marshall Commission archive. They had 9 other communications from your address signed Angela Maxwell between 2015 and 2017. 3 of them are also forged. I sat down on the floor of my studio apartment. What did the other 3 say? 2 were thank you notes to donors. 1 was a request to remove your name from the Commission's alumni newsletter. Apparently your mother did not want you to be contacted. In June 2019, Theodore Ashford convened a panel of 5 Marshall Commission members in Boston. They reviewed the Lockhart report, the visa records, and a sworn affidavit from Eleanor Bradshaw. They voted unanimously. The award was reactivated for the 2021 to 2023 academic cycle. They added a $25,000 distress and recovery stipend. Ashford called me that afternoon. "Welcome back to the program, Angela. I told them you would arrive twice as ready as anyone we have ever sent." Don't make me a liar. A month later, an email arrived from Cambridge. "Dear Ms. Maxwell, your deferred place at Pembroke College is reinstated for Michaelmas term 2021. We look forward to welcoming you." I read the email in my studio. I cried for the first time in 9 months. Then I texted my mother. "Looking forward to Whitney's wedding next year." Heart emoji. I had no intention of going. I needed her to think I was still the daughter she could push around. The wedding never happened. In May 2020, Trevor Hollingsworth called off the engagement 2 weeks before the ceremony. The official reason: differing life directions. The real reason came out later, through a mutual friend. Trevor had discovered that Whitney had withdrawn $40,000 from a joint engagement account they had opened for honeymoon expenses. She had wired the money to bridge a foundation startup, she said. She would not tell him which foundation. Trevor walked. Whitney did not stay quiet. 8 days after the cancellation, she posted a long Instagram caption with a black and white photograph of herself looking pensively out a window. "Sometimes the universe redirects us so we can serve a higher purpose. Launching the Maxwell Sister Foundation this fall. honoring my own quiet sister who chose family above ambition. The post tagged a woman from behind in a beige sweater. The caption referred to me by name 4 times. The woman was not me. I was in my studio apartment 6 miles away, working a freelance contract for a dental office in Pineville. I screenshotted the post. I sent it to Theodore Ashford. The subject line of the email said, Evidence number 18. On September 23, 2021, I landed at Heathrow. I was 25 years old. I had 3 suitcases, 412 British pounds in cash, a Cambridge admission letter, and a manila folder I had been carrying for 36 months. Pembroke College gave me a room in the new graduate building, number 14B. It overlooked a small courtyard with a fountain. I unpacked. I set the framed glass on my desk first. Inside the glass were the 4 pieces of my passport taped back together, dated September 2018, photographed and laminated. It was the first thing every Cambridge classmate noticed when they walked into my room. "Is that art?" one asked. "It's a receipt," I said. My thesis advisor was a Professor Daniel Pemberton, a quiet man in his 60s who specialized in legal recourse for victims of family financial fraud. I told him my story over a single cup of tea in his office. He listened without writing anything down. "Ms. Maxwell," he said when I finished, "this thesis is extraordinarily personal. Are you sure you want to publish under your own name?" I told him I had been published under my own name without my consent for 6 years. This time I wanted to do it on purpose. He smiled. He poured me more tea. That night at Cambridge, I opened my laptop and found a forwarded email at the top of my inbox. It had been sent to a donor named Josephine Caldwell, owner of a Charlotte real estate firm. "Dear Whitney, please thank your sister Angela for the personal note she sent me last week. I am happy to renew my $25,000 pledge to the Maxwell Sister Foundation." I had never written a note to Josephine Caldwell. I had never spoken to her. I did not know her name. Whitney's Maxwell Sister Foundation had been incorporated in November 2020. Its mission statement read, "Honoring quiet caregivers, those who chose family over ambition." The website featured a photograph of me, taken when I was 17 years old, lifted from my mother's Facebook account without my knowledge. The bio below the photograph read, "Angela Maxwell, the family caregiver who turned down Cambridge to nurture her family." By the time I arrived at Cambridge, the foundation had raised $185,000. The largest single donation had come from the Hollingsworth Family Trust, $75,000. Memo line, "In honor of Angela Maxwell's quiet sacrifice." Trevor Hollingsworth had walked away from Whitney over $40,000 in 2020 and then donated nearly twice that in 2022 to a foundation built on a fictional version of me. He did not know. Nobody knew. My sister had not just stolen my past. She was actively performing my present, and donors had been paying her to do it. I hired Spencer Hollis in January 2022. He was a forensic accountant in Atlanta, a former FBI financial crimes investigator who had gone private after 22 years at the Bureau. Theodore Ashford had recommended him. Hollis subpoenaed the records of the joint savings account my mother had opened with me when I was 16. It took 3 months to get the full transaction history. When the records arrived, he laid them out across his conference table and asked me to come down from London. I flew to Atlanta in May 2022. I sat across from him. "Ms. Maxwell," he said, "your mother withdrew funds from your account 17 times between January 2017 and June 2018. Total, $11,512. Every withdrawal was made on a day you were tutoring out of town. Concord, Mooresville, Lake Norman. Your mother knew your tutoring schedule, down to the day. This was not impulsive. It was operational." He turned a printout to face me. A column of withdrawal dates. A column of my tutoring locations on those dates. A perfect match. 17 for 17. "And the deposits?" I asked. He turned the page. Most of the cash was deposited within 72 hours into Whitney Maxwell's personal Capital One account. Your mother withdrew. Your sister received. We are not just looking at theft. We are looking at concerted fraud. I hired Jonathan Pierce in August 2022. Pierce was a civil rights attorney in Charlotte who specialized in identity theft and digital fraud. He was 38, soft-spoken, the kind of lawyer who never raised his voice and never lost a case. Pierce subpoenaed Google for records on the email account that had sent the original Marshall withdrawal letter in May 2015. The email account was angela.r.maxwell.92@gmail.com. I had never created that account. The recovery phone number was Whitney's. The IP address of every login was the Maxwell home router in Myers Park. The withdrawal email had been sent at 11:17 p.m. on May 3, 2015. I checked my old time card from the coffee shop where I worked nights. I had clocked out at midnight that day. I had been at work when the email was sent. Pierce called me into his office. Ms. Maxwell, this is the cleanest case of intrafamily identity fraud I have seen in 15 years. Your mother forged the letter. Your sister sent it. The Marshall Commission file is the smoking gun. The bank record is the motive. The donor emails are the ongoing crime. He paused. There is federal exposure here. Wire fraud, false statements to a federally chartered scholarship body. Your sister is one filing away from a federal indictment. The question is, do you want a quiet civil settlement, or do you want a record? I did not need to think about it. I want a record. In June 2023, with Pierce's help, I wrote a letter to 14 of the largest donors of the Maxwell Sister Foundation. I did not accuse anyone. I asked one question. Have you ever spoken to me directly? 11 of 14 replied within 72 hours. Of course. Angela, your last note about the Bahamas trip moved me deeply. Yes, dear, you wrote me last spring. Your handwritten card was lovely. Angela, you and I had such a wonderful exchange about your foundation work. I have your letters in a drawer in my study. I had never been to the Bahamas. I had never written a card. I had never had any exchange with any of these donors. Pierce and I tracked the impersonation emails. We collected 62 of them, sent over 2.5 years, all from a forwarded inbox routed through a third-party service Whitney had set up under my name. The total raised on the strength of these forged communications was $118,200. And among the 11 donors who had replied to my letter, one name made me stop reading. Trevor Hollingsworth. I flew to Charlotte for the first time in 7 years in August 2025. I went straight to Pierce's office. Trevor was already waiting in the conference room. He stood up when I walked in. He had not seen me in person since 2018. He was 37 now. He had filled in around the edges. There was gray in his beard. Angela, he said. He shook my hand. He held it the same way he had at our first meeting, a beat too long. I laid out the file, the Lockhart report, the Hollis Bank forensics, the email IP traces, the 62 donor impersonation emails, including the 4 to him. He read for 38 minutes. When he finished, he set the folder down on the table. He put his hands flat on either side of it. My God, he said. I broke off the wedding because Whitney was lying about money. I never knew she was lying about you. You're the reason I gave her $75,000. The story of you. The fictional you. I did not say anything. I waited. He looked up. What do you need from me? An invitation, I said. To her birthday gala. I need to walk in with the family. I need her to see me from across the room before the lights go down. The Maxwell Sister Foundation announced Whitney's 35th birthday charity gala in September 2025. The venue was Quail Hollow Club, the same club where her wedding was supposed to have happened in 2019. 350 guests, $1,200 per ticket. Black tie. A keynote address from a surprise speaker. A private award presentation. Charlotte Quiet Hero of the Year, to be presented to Whitney Maxwell, whose quiet sacrifice built a legacy of love. Trevor bought me a ticket under the name Hollingsworth, +1. He had been invited as a longtime supporter. Whitney did not know he had been working with me for 10 weeks. On December 11th, 2025, I boarded a flight from London Heathrow to Charlotte. I had a Cambridge degree, a published book contract, and a manila folder containing 9 forensic reports. Theodore Ashford called me as my plane was boarding. "Angela, the Marshall Commission has accepted the keynote slot under a different name. We arrive at 7:45 p.m. The screen is ready. Are you?" I told him I was. By December, I had 9 forensic reports, 62 donor emails, 3 federal subpoenas, 1 reissued passport, and 1 folder marked Pamela. My sister had 35 candles to blow out. I had 7 years to give back. Before I tell you what happened in that ballroom, let me ask you something. If you knew your sister had been writing your life without you for 7 years, and you had the proof in your hand, would you confront her quietly, or would you let her hand you the microphone in front of 350 witnesses? Comment quiet or public. I want to know what you would have done, and then watch what I did. Quail Hollow Club at 7 minutes to 7 on December 13th, 2025. I wore a black floor-length dress with no jewelry. My hair was pulled back tight. Trevor Hollingsworth stood at my left elbow. His mother, Eleanor Hollingsworth, stood at my right. I had met her once, 12 hours earlier, over coffee. She had reviewed the file. She had cried briefly. Then she had asked if she could stand beside me when I walked in. At the entrance, my mother was working the welcome table. She wore a navy gown. On the lapel of her shawl was the pearl brooch my grandmother had left to me in her will 11 years earlier. My mother had been wearing that brooch since 2014. I had asked for it twice. She had told me both times it was lost. She looked up. She saw me. She did not move for 5 full seconds. "Angela," she said, "you came. You invited me, indirectly. Whitney will be so happy. Don't make a scene tonight, Angela. Please." I smiled. I did not respond. Trevor took my arm. We walked into the ballroom. Whitney came down the central staircase at 7:32. She was wearing a white floor-length gown. The dress code for the night was black tie. Whitney had chosen white on purpose. She had wanted to be the only woman in the room in white, the way a bride is. She saw me from the second to last step. She froze. Trevor did not move his hand from my arm. He smiled at her with the careful courtesy of a man who has rehearsed exactly 1 sentence. She came toward us. Her hand was shaking. She was still smiling for the room. "What is this?" she whispered. "What are you doing here? Trevor, what is she doing here?" "She's my guest, Whitney," Trevor said, "and we have a few things to clear up before you give your speech." Whitney looked over at our mother. Our mother was already moving toward the exit. Whitney's face flickered. She turned back to me. "Angela, please, please don't." "You have 13 minutes, I said, "until your keynote." She walked away. She walked very, very fast. The lights dimmed at 7:45. The MC, a Charlotte Society columnist named Penelope Carruthers, took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a surprise speaker tonight. Mr. Theodore Ashford, director of the Marshall Commission's North American office, has flown in from Boston to honor a Maxwell family legacy." The room applauded politely. Most of the guests had no idea who Theodore Ashford was. Whitney did. I watched her from my table near the front. The blood drained from her face. Ashford walked to the podium. He was 65, silver-haired, wearing a charcoal suit. He set a leather folder on the lectern. He did not smile. Thank you, Ms. Carruthers. I am honored to be here tonight to recognize a Maxwell family legacy. Specifically, the Marshall Scholarship awarded in April of 2015 to Ms. Angela Rose Maxwell, and the 7-year odyssey it took for her to claim it. The room went still. Ashford gestured to the screen behind him. The original Marshall Award letter appeared, blown up to 12 feet wide. The amount, $128,500, glowed at the top of the document. A woman at table 9 put her hand over her mouth. In May of 2015, Ashford continued, the commission received a withdrawal letter, purportedly from Ms. Maxwell. The letter cited family caregiving obligations. We accepted it in good faith. We were wrong. The screen changed. The forged refusal letter appeared. The signature filled the bottom right corner. Forensic examination by Dr. Audrey Lockhart of Bethesda, Maryland, has conclusively identified the writer of this signature as Pamela Joan Maxwell, Angela's mother. The accompanying email was sent from a Gmail account registered to Whitney Maxwell, on a laptop registered to Whitney Maxwell, from an IP address located at the Maxwell residence in Myers Park. The screen split into 2 side-by-side signatures. Mine, the forgery. The R was the only difference. The room was so quiet I could hear the ice in my water glass settling. My mother had not made it to the exit. She had stopped 20 feet away from the door. She was holding the back of an empty chair. She turned to my father, who had been seated at table 4. Curtis, take me home. Now. My father did not move. For the first time in 30 years of marriage, my father did not move when my mother gave him an instruction. Whitney started toward the stage. A waiter intercepted her with a tray of champagne flutes. He did it on purpose. He had been briefed. At 7:58, Theodore Ashford handed the microphone to Jonathan Pierce. Ladies and gentlemen, Pierce said, you are not at a charity gala tonight. You are at the largest single-event reckoning of donor fraud Charlotte will see this decade. The screen changed again. A bar chart of the Maxwell Sister Foundation's fundraising history. $185,000 total. $75,000 from the Hollingsworth Family Trust. Of the 62 donor solicitations sent under Angela Maxwell's name, none were written by her. They were written by Whitney Maxwell, impersonating her own sister, while Angela was studying at Cambridge, a Cambridge place she had to win back from her mother's forgery. The screen changed once more. A list of donor names. 11 of them highlighted in red. Trevor's name was at the top. Trevor stood up at our table. He turned and looked toward Whitney, who had returned to a table near the back. He spoke just loudly enough for the room to hear him. Whitney, I gave you $75,000 based on a person who doesn't exist. Whitney did not look up. She held a napkin against her face. At 8:04, I walked to the stage. Ashford stepped aside. I looked out at the room. 350 people. Women in gowns I had seen on Instagram. Men I had only ever read about in the Charlotte Business Journal. The Hollingsworths, the Caldwells, 2 state senators, the president of Wells Fargo's Carolinas region. I found my mother in the crowd. She was still standing 20 feet from the door, holding the chair. Mom, I said. The microphone caught it perfectly. The brooch. Grandma left it to me in her will in 2014. You have worn it for 11 years. You wear it tonight while my sister is wearing the engagement ring meant to be split between us. You raised 2 daughters and gave one of them everything, including the things that didn't belong to either of you. My mother opened her mouth. You don't understand, she said. Whitney needed it. You always had more than her. You were always... She stopped. The room had gone perfectly still. She had no end to that sentence. She had never had an end to that sentence. She had been counting on no one ever asking her to finish it. I returned to the microphone. For 7 years, I worked 3 jobs to earn back a scholarship I had already won. For 7 years, my sister told this room I chose family. I did not choose. I was forged out of my life by a woman who called it love. I paused. I could hear someone crying at table 2. It was not Whitney. Tonight I am telling you, on the record, with my own voice, I did not stay home because I wanted to. I stayed home because I did not know I had been let in. I drew one breath. My name is Angela Rose Maxwell. I am 29 years old. I won the Marshall Scholarship at 19. I went to Cambridge at 25. And tonight, at the gala built in honor of a fiction, I am taking back my own name. The silence held for 6 full seconds. Then one person clapped. It was Trevor. Then a second pair of hands. My father. He had stood up at his table. He was clapping with both hands, slowly, deliberately, the way a man claps when he has finally understood something. Then the room. All of it. 300 people on their feet. The 2 state senators. The president of Wells Fargo. My Aunt Constance, who had driven 5 hours from Asheville and bought a last-minute ticket from a guest who had canceled. My mother and my sister did not clap. They did not need to. At 8:14, 2 men in dark suits walked across the ballroom floor. They moved without urgency. They moved like men who had done this before. One of them stopped at Whitney's chair. He did not raise his voice. Whitney Maxwell, we have a federal warrant for your arrest, wire fraud, identity theft, and false statements to a federally chartered institution. Please come with us quietly. The press is outside. We can protect your dignity if you cooperate. Whitney looked up. Her mascara had smeared. She nodded. She rose. The handcuffs were applied behind her back, low against her dress. The agents walked her out through a side service entrance. The room watched in silence. My mother sat down on the chair she had been holding. She did not collapse. She did not cry. She just sat. My father stood 10 feet from her. He did not approach. I walked off the stage. Trevor met me at the bottom of the steps. He held the door for me. Outside, 3 FBI vehicles were parked along the circular drive. A WBTV news van had its lights on. December air, 41 degrees. My breath fogged in front of me. I had spent 7 years in silence so that one night could be loud enough to last forever. As I stepped out of Quail Hollow into the December air, I realized I wasn't leaving my family behind. I was finally meeting myself. On December 18th, 2025, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of North Carolina returned a sealed indictment against Whitney Maxwell. 11 counts, wire fraud, 3 counts, identity theft, 4 counts, false statements to a federally chartered institution, 1 count, forgery conspiracy, 1 count, interstate fraud, 2 counts. On the same day, Pamela Joan Maxwell was charged with 4 counts: forgery, conspiracy, financial elder abuse, related to my grandfather's mishandled trust, interstate fraud. Jonathan Pierce called me with the numbers. Whitney faces 8 to 14 years federal. Pamela 5 to 9. Civil suit on top. $640,000 in restitution to the donors and the Marshall Commission. The Maxwell family will be paying this back for the rest of their working lives. The next morning, my mother sent me a text. We did it because we love you both. You'll understand someday. I did not respond. I screenshotted the message. I sent it to Pierce. He filed it. On December 22nd, my father called me. He was already at a Starbucks 2 blocks from my old studio apartment. He had driven straight there from a hotel where he had been living since the gala. He had moved out of the Maxwell house the night before. He was 58 years old. He looked 70. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not cry. Your mother told me you didn't want the scholarship, he said. She told me you were the kind of girl who needed family more than career. I believed her because believing her was easier than asking you. I owe you the question I never asked. He laid a brown paper envelope on the table. Open it. Inside were 11 greeting cards in Aunt Constance's handwriting, all addressed to me, all unopened. He had found them in the back of the upstairs hall closet. My mother had stored them in a hat box with the wedding china. "What did you want, Angela?" I looked at him for a long time. He held my gaze. "Dad, I want you to write me one letter a month. For 1 year. No expectations. Just show up. We'll see." He nodded. He stood up. He walked out. He did not look back. My mother did not apologize. On December 24th, she posted a long statement on her private Facebook page, visible to 200 friends. "My daughter Angela has chosen her career over her family. We forgive her. We pray for her healing." She had not understood any part of what had happened. She left me a voicemail 2 days later, 53 seconds long. I saved it as evidence. I never deleted it. "Angela, you ruined Whitney. You ruined this family. For what? A degree? A book? You'll come back. They always come back." I realized that night that my mother would never apologize, because in her version of the story, she had built her family. She had not stolen mine. The two of us could not live in the same fact. On December 27th, Whitney's defense attorney offered a plea deal. She would accept 5 of the 11 counts. She would pay $185,000 in restitution. 6 years of probation, no jail time. Pierce called me to ask my position. The U.S. Attorney's Office had asked for the victim's input. "No," I said. "She doesn't get to choose how this ends. She chose how it began. The court will decide the rest." Pierce filed the response within the hour. That night, Whitney sent me a single direct message on Instagram. I had not blocked her yet. "Please, I'll lose everything." I read the message. I did not respond. I blocked her. On December 28th, I wrote one letter to my mother. I sent it through Pierce. I did not write a second. The letter was 1 page. It did not accuse. It did not negotiate. The last paragraph read, "You may keep the brooch. You may keep the story you tell yourself. But you may not keep me. I am not your daughter who came home. I am the daughter who finally stayed gone." Pierce confirmed receipt the next morning. My mother did not reply. She never has. They had spent 29 years calling silence family. I had spent 7 years learning the difference between betrayal and blood. December 2025 was the month I stopped paying interest on someone else's debt of love. On December 30th, 2025, I launched the Angela Rose Foundation. It is not called the Maxwell Foundation. I am keeping that name for myself. The foundation has an opening endowment of $2 million. It funds first-generation graduate students whose families have actively sabotaged their educational pathways. Trevor Hollingsworth is a founding board member. Theodore Ashford is the chairman. The logo is a wax seal stamped with the initials ARM, 3 letters that will never be forged again. The first application arrived on the first day. A 19-year-old girl from Toledo, Ohio. Her older sister had convinced their parents she should not go to Stanford. She had been waiting 2 years for someone to believe her. I read her letter twice. I called her that afternoon. "You're going to Stanford in the fall," I told her. "We'll handle the rest." Penguin Random House published my book on December 2nd, 2025. It is titled The Letter I Never Sent: How My Family Stole 7 Years of My Life. First week sales, $310,000. The full amount went into the foundation's endowment. The cover is a photograph of 4 torn pieces of a passport, taped back together, photographed from above. The pieces are real. They are mine. The dedication on the first page reads, "For every daughter told to wait. The wait is over. The pen was always yours." My Aunt Constance sent me a text the day the book came out. "Your grandfather is smiling somewhere. He always knew, baby." On December 31st, 2025, I stood at a Pembroke College alumni gathering in London. The audience was 200 Cambridge alumni, faculty, and a small group of Marshall scholars. I spoke for 4 minutes. I did not cry. I used to think family was the people who knew you longest. I learned it is the people who do not need you to be silent. My sister tore my passport. The embassy gave me a new one. The Marshall Commission gave me back my scholarship. Cambridge gave me my degree. But the only person who could give me back my name was me. And I did. On December 13th, 2025, in front of 350 witnesses. Once. For good. I held up my new passport, issued October 2nd, 2018. Cambridge visa stamps filling almost every page. If this story found you tonight, maybe you have a sister, maybe you have a mother, maybe you have a name they have been writing without you. Take it back. Sign it yourself. The embassy of your own life is open. Some daughters were born to be held. I was born to be held back. Until I wasn't. If this story found you tonight, tell me your version below. Tell me the letter you never sent. Tell me the embassy you walked into alone. We are reading every comment. We are not the only ones who waited. We are not the only ones who came back.